right, so before we get started, reverse retro from the reverse retro collection. Very cool. Hockey comes back soon. Can't flip and wait. So today's player profile, if you haven't noticed already by the thumbnail, title, and the board behind me, we are talking about Rashod Bateman, wide receiver from Minnesota. It was a very tumultuous roller coaster of a year for the Big Ten in 2020, who at first decided we're not going to play football. And then after sort of getting more confident and comfortable, they would be able to take care of their players' health during a pandemic, voted to reinstate, ended up playing a season that was, I don't want to say perfect by any means, because it wasn't with the canceled games, but I think they did their best with the situation that they had. When it comes to Rashod Bateman and the Minnesota Golden Gophers, they didn't have a good go of things. They actually did not replicate the magic season that they had last year. A lot of it was due to players being unavailable due to pandemic conditions, and the fact that the team was just not the same as it was last year. Play calling was a lot worse. There was calls for the offensive coordinator to be fired, and they didn't have a lot of their talent from the previous season that was drafted last year. I believe they had a school record 5 draft picks in the 2019 draft. One of those notably being Rashod Bateman's, workhorse alongside him in the wide receiver group. That was Tyler Johnson. So without Tyler Johnson, I thought Ottman-Bell and Bateman would be able to continue sort of the dynamic duo of wide receivers that they had last year in Minnesota, but it didn't quite work out this year as they sort of transitioned to a very heavy rushing attack with Mohamed Ibrahim, who is actually going back to school. Very excited to see him play another year in Minnesota. So with having that all said, Rashod Bateman also had a roller coaster from an individual standpoint, originally opting out of the 2020 season after it was initially thought that the Big Ten wasn't going to be playing football at all. But thanks to the presence of Ohio State, and I think a lot of it had to do with everybody realizing Ohio State's team this year was good enough to get into the NCAA championship, and here we are. We're recording this the day before that game gets played. Big Ten football came back. He opted back in, almost kind of at the 11th hour, if you will. And it didn't go well. He still put up great statistics for the season for the time that he played. I know this is where you look at the stats behind me. It doesn't look like it out of context, but in context, he was still productive despite the team playing poorly this year. So let's get into the player profile here. He is a junior wide receiver, 6'2", 210 pounds, depending on what website you get your information from. 2018, he came in as a freshman wanting to make a statement, and that he did. 13 games, 51 receptions for 704 yards, 6 touchdowns. 2019 was the great season that we all well know. 13 games, 60 receptions, 1,219 yards, 11 touchdowns. The production jumped through the roof. In 2020, of course, we just discussed all of the problems and roller coaster type season that it was. 5 games, 36 receptions, 472 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, Minnesota ended up playing 7 games total, but Rashod Bateman opted out following the Purdue game, which was the last game that he played, 4 receptions and 59 yards. I think it was at that point that he probably realized, hey, this team is really bad, and me sticking around is doing nothing to help myself, and the only thing that I'm really doing is risking injury, which I don't think anybody wanted anyway. I was actually kind of shocked that he didn't opt out sooner, especially after the Iowa game, where they just sort of had their way with us, and the Maryland game was also just nightmares. How that one ended, stuff of nightmares. So he opts out after Purdue. Minnesota goes on to win against Nebraska and then lose to Wisconsin in the final. I think if Rashod Bateman had played that game against Wisconsin, we probably would have won that one. The bias is soaking in here. So without Rashod Bateman to close out the season, Minnesota closes out the season in disappointment, and Rashod Bateman is headed off to the NFL. Looking at the big board rankings around the internet right now, currently number 20 overall on Tankathon and the number 4 wide receiver. PFF has him listed as the number 15 overall prospect and the number 4 wide receiver for the Draft Network, the number 23 overall prospect. Now for the scouting notes, some of my own and some of the ones that I've gathered from various scouting profiles from around the internet. Something to look out for is the route running and the separation, because he doesn't have absolute 100% I'm going to burn you Tyreek Hill type of speed, but he does have the tools and the techniques and little gadgets that he can manipulate in order to gain separation due to his crisp route running. And most of the routes are going to be like inside slants, things of that sort that you see on the film. But you watch some of the other stuff that he's capable of doing, and he can get off of coverage in more ways than one. And I think that's what a lot of NFL teams are going to be looking for in a wide receiver that doesn't have Tyreek Hill speed, is that he's going to be able to get off of his defender. Because if you cannot get separation in the NFL, you are not going to be a successful wide receiver. That's just the way that it is. Another thing that scouts are going to look at, or at least teams are going to look at for what kind of player they're going to get out of Rashod Bateman, is that he's a big-time yak player. Yards after ability, or yards after catch ability. I don't know why I said that. But yards after catch is where he really shines. Get him in space, throw him on a wide receiver screen. The inside slants are obvious because, it's a 5-yard pass, and then let him do the rest of the work. He won't not outrun a lot of people. You'll see a lot of times he will get chased down and tackled, but he'll make a lot of guys miss in the process. So you're going to get yards after the catch, and that is one of the benefits of a receiver like Rashod Johnson. It's got a nice frame for it, too. He also has great hands. I mean, can we talk about some of the catches that he made for the 2019 season? A lot of Odell Beckham-esque catches, if you will. And I don't know if people are tired of making that comparison when it comes to great catches outside of the NFL, but there's a reason that they do. And it's not just the circus catches either. It's all of the catches where you look at where his hands just turn into a vacuum. If I need a first down on a 3rd and 5 or a 3rd and 7, I'm probably going to be looking Rashod Bateman's way as my number one read, because the guy is definitely dependable. So that's another great asset. So you throw all those things into a blender. The route running that gets him the separation, his yards after catch ability, and his great hands. This is why this guy is going to go in the first round of the NFL draft. Of course, the only negative that I think people are going to talk about is here at the bottom of the screen, and that is the elite speed that we talked about. He's not going to turn on the jets and burn you like a Tyreek Hill, which I think is fine given his skill set doesn't necessitate that he needs to possess that ability. So that's going to do it for this player profile on Rashod Bateman. Very excited to see him at the next level. Disappointed that we only got to see 5 games out of him this year, but I think given how terrible that the Gophers offense was and how much it transitioned to relying on Ibrahim, it's probably more beneficial that he only played 5 games, didn't further injure himself or injure himself at all, and do anything to hurt his draft stock. So look forward to seeing Rashod Bateman's name called in the first round of the 2021 NFL Draft. If you're a team like the Green Bay Packers, Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland Browns, who need a receiver like this, probably middle to late first round, I think, is where you're going to find him. So that's going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.